Hello, this is a quick walkthrough tutorial of paper 1 question 2 using the 2020 The Silk Factory paper. This is question 2. Look in detail at this extract from lines 14 to 23, and in paper 1 that text is reproduced in front for you. Before you read this extract and start highlighting it, I would suggest that you have a look at the question to ensure you know what you're focusing on. How does the writer use language here to describe the garden? That means that when I'm looking at this text, I only want to be focusing on how the garden is being presented. It tells me that I could include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques, and sentence forms. I would suggest that you don't worry about sentence forms, as it often leads you into writing about structure, and it's not necessary to write about sentence forms in order to be successful. This is an 8-mark question, therefore you should spend no longer than 10 minutes on this question, and you're aiming to write 2 to 3 good, detailed what, how, why paragraphs. Before you start writing, I would suggest that you have a quick look at the text and you highlight the ideas that you're going to come up with. It's a good idea when you annotate to highlight the quotation itself, to then name any devices that you know are being used within that technique, and then just make a very brief comment about how that describes the garden. So Rosie had made a quick check of the unfamiliar garden before letting the children go out to play. The bottom half of the garden was an overgrown mess, a muddle of trees and shrubs. An ancient mulberry tree stood at the centre. Its massive twisted branches drooped to the ground in places, its knuckles in the earth like a gigantic malformed hand. The wintry sun hung low in the sky, and the gnarled growth threw long, twisted shadows across the undergrowth within its cage. The trunk of a tree was snarled with tangled ivy that grew up through the broken bricks and chunks of cement, choking it. The path that led down towards the fence at the bottom, which marked the garden off from the orchard beyond, disappeared into a mess of nettles and brambles before it reached the padlocked door. So you can see here that I've gone through and I've been able to highlight quite a lot of information that would be relevant to include in my answer. So what I need to do now is I need to be more discerning, and I need to pick out up to 5 examples of things that I could write about. One thing that struck me as I've gone through this is the semantic field of language that's being used. And so one of those semantic fields has quite a sinister, almost malicious feel to it. So I'm just going to talk about those. So firstly, I've got this adjective unfamiliar here. Then I've also got this idea here of it being malformed. I've got here twisted shadows. I've got gnarled. I've got cage. I've got snarled, tangled. I've got broken bricks. And I've got choking. Then I also have disappeared and the word padlocked. So with all of that vocabulary, I think we've got a real semantic field of disorder here. So a semantic field of sinister / disorder, and that makes me feel quite tense, almost as if the garden is like a monster in a way. So we can talk a lot about that vocabulary. As well as that, we've also got here this simile like a gigantic malformed hand. And this simile again has connotations of the tree almost being like a monster. We've then got this verb choking here, and this makes it sound like the garden is alive and is attacking. There's also a semantic field of things being broken and of this idea of the garden being very untidy. You know, we've got that overgrown mess, a muddle of trees, we've got the ancient mulberry. So what we need to do is we need to put all of this together to really help us think about the way that the writer is presenting the garden. So when it comes to writing, we've got those three elements to consider again. We've got the what, we've got the what, we've got the how, and we've got the why. And remember, this means what technique does the writer use to present the garden? Remember, the question says describes, that's what we're looking for. How does the writer show this? And again, that's a reminder to use our quotation. And then why? Why does the writer use this technique? And then you're also considering, why is it effective? What does it make you think, feel, or imagine? So, if we're going to think about turning these ideas into a paragraph, let's have a go at writing one of those together. So let's focus on the simile of the gigantic malformed hand. Now, although this is a simile, it's also working in a way to personify the tree and to make it come to life. So we're going to start with the what technique. And remember, we want to ensure that we're coming across as mature and critical writers, so we're going to use the writer's surname to help us structure that response. So we're going to say, Allnut, that's the name of the writer here, Allnut uses a monstrous simile I'm going to have here knuckles in the earth like a gigantic malformed hand. I'm just going to underline that in purple so that we know where we've used our quotation. So, Allnut uses a monstrous simile, knuckles in the earth like a gigantic malformed hand, to develop an image of the mulberry tree as being a dominant and sinister presence in the unfamiliar garden. So we've done our what and our how there, and you'll see that I've used another embedded quotation here just to allow me to be more succinct in my phrasing. The next thing I need to do is explain why that simile is monstrous, why that simile creates a sinister feeling. Okay? So I'm going to say, all that uses a monstrous simile, knuckles in the earth like a giant malformed hand, to develop an image of the mulberry tree as being a dominant and sinister presence in the unfamiliar garden. This personifies the tree and gives it a sense of malicious intent, almost as if the tree is in charge and ruling over the garden. Now we want to also look at some of the other language that's being presented within here. So we might say, furthermore, the adjective gigantic draws the reader's attention to the sheer size of this tree, which again suggests its dominance. Now, there's a lot within this quotation that we could then go on to continue to analyse. We could also talk about the use of the word malformed and the connotations that we have with that word. We might look at the noun hand and consider the connotations of control that throws up. So the key thing with this question is to write a lot about a little. I hope that helps.